Well, welcome everyone. While you're logging on, I would like to begin by telling you a bit about the Country Bookshop in downtown Southern Pines, North Carolina. We are unique in that we are a bookstore that is part of a small community, twice weekly award-winning newspaper called The Pilot. We are a general bookstore for kids and adults that is part of a community that chooses to shop with us and share their stories and lives with us and celebrate the people who create the books that generate change and discussion throughout the world, like what we will talk today with Cook, Heal, Go Vegan. In these intros, I never mentioned myself, but I will today. I switched to a mostly plant-based diet totally plant-based diet at the time during the intense lockdown, and the dramatic change in my appearance has garnered so many comments and questions from the community who supports the Country Bookshop. And when I talk about going vegetable, I'm not a chef, and there's so many questions that people have. And so that is why I've asked for Chef Bai to join us today. And so let me introduce her and we'll begin our chat. Bailey Ruskus, is that how I pronounce your name?
That's Ruskus.
Okay, Bailey Ruskus, also known as Chef Bai, is a seasoned chef and holistic nutrition and health coach. She's classically trained at Le Cordon Bleu in San Francisco and uses her culinary expertise to create rich flavors with clean, nourishing ingredients. She shares tips and beginner-friendly comfort food recipes that make switching to a plant-based diet easy and totally tasty and totally doable in her cookbook, Cook, Heal, Go Vegan, with recipes highlighting the comfort food flavors of the most popular cuisines in the United States: Italian, Mexican, American, Asian, and Indian. This cookbook meets the needs for y'all who are interested in the plant-based diet for health reasons. Her podcast, The Plant Remedy, features interviews on plant-based living with chefs, doctors, entrepreneurs, environmentalists, and more. She also has a thriving membership-based virtual culinary business and nutrition consulting that includes meal plans, hosts virtual cooking classes, and has taught thousands about the healing power of food. Bailey lives in San Diego, California, and is joining us today from Santa Barbara. And I want to thank you for speaking with us in North Carolina today.
Thanks so much. From, coast to coast.
Coast to coast, that's right. Did I get that right about your web business? It's kind of what I gleaned spending a lot of time on your web.
Yeah, it's honestly, I do so many things, but the thing I'm most proud of is our online membership program, where we basically teach people how to confidently cook on the fly, build flavor, all that kind of thing. And yeah, we teach weekly 45-minute virtual classes.
Well, that leads right into my first question, because my very first question is about flavor, because I am a food nut. And when I'm talking with people about going plant-based, I don't think they understand how delicious plants are, vegetables are. And I was wondering one of the things I loved about the book is in the intro, you're talking about the flavor on a level that I think people really appreciate. So I was wondering if you could just dive in to flavor.
Absolutely. I think we have this, which is, understandable, this idea that plant-based food is lacking, especially when it comes to flavor and pleasure and all those things that you want to get when you're eating your meals, because it's such a pleasurable thing to do, is to eat. And that is from restaurants that just don't really understand how to make plant-based food. So for me, when I first started this journey, I'd go to restaurants and the only thing that would be available would be a salad with a really weird vinaigrette and French fries. There's not a lot of availability. So if that's your experience with plant-based food, it totally makes sense why you would feel like it's not gonna, fit the standard. However, because I'm a classically French trained chef, I use those techniques and that skill set and that knowledge to be able to show people that you can actually use all of that knowledge to cook with plants. And on the same side of it, it's if you are cooking meat, what gives meat flavor? It's plants, right? It's spices and herbs and salts, and all of those things that's giving that meat flavor is from the plant world itself. And I think when you can really think about that, for instance, tofu and chicken are the perfect examples for this, because you would never just put a chicken breast in a boiling pot of water unseasoned, and expect it to taste like anything great. And the same goes with tofu. So if you've eaten plain tofu before at like a Thai restaurant that like wasn't seasoned, and you're like, well, I don't like tofu because it's very boring and plain, it's the same thing. It just needs seasoning or marinating or pressing or grilling or whatever it is. It's the same kind of concept. And so you can manipulate plants and you can manipulate all these different things to make all these different kinds of foods. And even like my mac and cheese recipe, it's literally the cheese sauce is made from vegetables, but it tastes exactly like cheese. And for me, it's really important to show people that you can learn how to develop flavor, and it's not going to cost an arm and a leg, or a finger, right? Like, and you can do it safely, and it's going to be really delicious and good for you too. And you can even convince your kids to eat it because they'll have no idea. To them, it'll just be mac and cheese.
The most delicious. You know, I love, and we can go deeper into your journey in a little bit, but you know, you have the top chef training that one can get, and you also have this nutrition school training. And I'm wondering about, you know, both of those inform this great cookbook, but I'm wondering, like, what did you learn in nutrition school after all of that formal chef training that at Le Cordon Bleu that was the most surprising? Were there like specific contradictions, or was it just a totally different mindset of approaching?
Yeah. Well, I went to two different programs. So the first one talked a lot about bio-individuality. It talked a lot about the food industry in a way that I had never really learned about it. As a chef, you know, you go to a top culinary art school, you get your degree in culinary arts, but you're not really taught about food and like how it's grown, and or how, you know, animals are raised. And so this first, you know, it was like a 2-year nutrition training. This first training, I learned a lot about glyphosate, and I learned a lot about farming, and I learned a lot about these toxic things that we're ingesting every single day. And like the practices of factory farming for animals. And I learned about all these things. And this was way before I even decided to go vegan. And I was shocked. I was like, you know, I felt like I had been betrayed by the industry that I so much like gripped my identity onto. And that for me was really eye-opening in realizing that like people just don't even know the depths of the toxicities of the agriculture industry. And you know, we talk about organic versus conventional, and like there's such a stark contrast between the two. And it's like my mission in life is to get this information out to as many people as possible, because, you know, we are in a chronic health crisis. And even before the pandemic hit, when I was, you know, when I was looking at what was happening in China, I was like, my God, if this comes to the United States, this is going to be horrific because of the amount of people. I mean, if you look at the amount of people who are dying with heart disease every single day, it's the same numbers of peak COVID of people that were dying from COVID every single day. It is a crisis. And I think that it gets so pushed underneath the rug and people try to pretend like it's not there, but it's really intense. And so that was like one of the first things that I really learned. And then especially being a French trained chef, because everything you learn how to cook is like pork belly and duck fat and like Gruyere cheese on everything, you know? So it was a very big eye opener for me, and someone that was dealing with chronic health issues. I was like, wow, I'm literally making myself sick. And I had absolutely no idea. And then the second thing, I guess, was I did a very plant-based focus course from T. Colin Campbell, and he wrote the China study, and everything that I learned in there talked a lot about how we don't really understand diseases in general. We don't really understand how protein works. I mean, the craziest thing that I realized is how, you know, we have this protein obsession in our society, and we're so worried about how we're getting protein, but like people are getting too much protein. And what happens when you get too much protein is you get liver disease, you get liver cancer, you get kidney failure. And that's like one of the top 10 leading causes of death also. And like, no one is talking about that. Everyone's so worried. You know, when I first went vegan, it was like, where are you getting your protein from? And when I learned these facts, I was like, this is insane. Like, this is just the craziest miscommunication that I have ever seen. And the same goes with like diabetes, and thinking that, you know, diabetes comes solely from having too much sugar, but in reality, you can get diabetes from having too much fat in your blood, which comes from eating too much bacon and eating too much cheese and all of these things and fried foods. And that can cause diabetes, which can create an insulin resistance. But it's not necessarily from having candy, right? So there's all of these like just I think as a society, we're just so misinformed, and there's so much weird confusion out there, like Joe Rogan promoting the carnivore diet and getting people hyped on this, or like the keto craze, like keto was never meant to be something that people do all the time. It was supposed to be for kids with epilepsy. That's where it came from. And it became this crazy weight loss trend. But what's happening is people who are very young, who are on the keto diet, are developing heart disease in their 30s. So it's just kind of like this mass miscommunication, the age of miscommunication. And for me, it was like, I mean, it's very eye-opening. My whole vegan journey has been so eye-opening, and it's a little hard to exist in a world where you just feel like you're like, nobody gets it. You know what I mean? Like,
that literally, so my literal next question is why, and I don't know, why does vegan have such an intense reaction? Like, it's a knee jerk, so much of your work is like, think what you put in your body, and I think it's a knee jerk reaction, but do you like, why do you think,
I mean, it goes against everything we're ever taught. And I think it challenges people to look at animals as their own self, as their own being, that we don't really have the right to decide whether they live or die. And I think we've looked at animals so much as a commodity, as a product, and it's a very hard shift to go from thinking of an animal as a product to thinking of an animal as like a being. And that's very hard for people, because when you do start to make that shift, it's like so uncomfortable. So for me, like, I come from a long line of butchers, actually. My grandfather was a butcher. My great uncle was a butcher. And I learned this last summer when I did my dad did an ancestry thing. And he's like, told me the 7 long line of butchers that I come from. And he's like, that is so ironic. Especially because I'm a vegan chef now. And, it's an entire like ancestral way of thinking that we're trying to change. And so when you look at it from all sides, you look at it from the animals, but you also look at it from the health perspective, it goes against everything we've ever been told. And when you realize everything you've ever been told have been backed by the corporations themselves that are telling you. So for instance, Got Milk was fueled by the dairy industry, because there was, people started eating so much cheese that there was all of this like 0% milk fat, like byproduct, which is like the fat-free milk, right? So they had billions of gallons of milk to get rid of. And so they started this Got Milk campaign, convincing mothers that it's good for our bones and all these things. Like my mom like made me drink my milk growing up, because that's just like that's what we were told, we didn't know any better. And when you look at it, it actually causes osteoporosis. It causes the exact opposite thing that they're telling you that, it's from. And so it's really hard, because if you're watching this right now and you're like, well, wait, like I've been doing this thinking I'm doing something good for my family, you and literally everybody else. And I think the most powerful thing that's happened and that's created change with this movement, and why veganism is becoming something that more people are like saying yes to trying, is because of social media, is because people are getting out there, and we're not just, the only thing we're watching is TV commercials that are telling us one thing. Like, we're actually questioning, like, well, who funded that study? Like, if there's a study saying milk is good for you, and you look at the study, if you really look at the funding, the dairy industry funds it. You can't trust a study that's funded by the industry that's going to make billions of dollars of you believing and buying into this study. So it's really long answer short. It's really just like going against everything we've ever been told. And it's hard for people to trust that veganism is good for you. And it's also like, we all know that one vegan who was really unhealthy also. So just because you're vegan doesn't mean you're healthy, and that's why I love the term plant-based as well. And that's why, the first sentences of my book is like, we're redefining what it means to be vegan, because it's like a whole new era. This is like the pandemic, like health crisis era of humanity. And like, and I feel like I have a responsibility. We have a responsibility for our children, for our parents, for our people that we care about in our lives, to just like, to learn and to do better, because we can do better for our environment, for the animals, and for ourselves. Because as someone that's been chronically sick since I was 11, like, it makes sense why,
Yeah. As a pediatrician once told me, the only thing that cow's milk is made for is baby cows. Like that's what it's made for. It's baby cows. That's what it's for.
Exactly.
Well, and it's interesting to me, a lot of the conversations that I have, and people are approaching me to have these conversations because of the outward appearance change.
Right.
I guess, I don't know. And I sit at a counter all day and talk to people at the bookstore.
Yeah.
But the first question is like, well, did you eat fruit? Did you eat peanuts? And you were talking about which I wanted you to just talk about. You referenced several times in the book, eat the rainbow, and just, eating plants makes sense to me, because it's just like, oh yeah, does that grow from, is that a plant?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a seed? Like, yes, then you can eat that. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because there's just, that question comes from such a different space of thinking that I'm wondering if you might be more capable of addressing than I do, which is just like, fruit's really good for you.
Yeah, totally. And I think, the nutrition misinformation, depending on what people are trying to sell, that's always in people's minds too. And I talked about this yesterday during an interview. There's a lot of food fear going around. And, people could say like, well, you're making food fear for like dairy and meat, but it's not necessarily food fear. It's food knowledge and having like an ethical baseline of what you will and will not eat. But when we're looking at, fruits and vegetables, for instance, like going back to the diabetes thing, like fruit does not cause diabetes. Like it doesn't. And there's actually a lot of studies coming out now about eating fruit, having diabetes, and cutting out like heavy fats and all these things, and actually being able to reverse diabetes. There's this amazing book called Mastering Diabetes. It's like mind-blowing information. So yeah, that goes with like the fruit thing. It's kind of like this misinterpreted keto. It like makes you fear fruit. It's like fruit has so much amazing natural sugar in it. It has antioxidants, phytonutrients. It has things that will make your skin glow. It will help with anti-aging. It will help with weight loss. Like there's so many amazing things that fruit can give to you, that to be afraid of it and to just blanket statement fruit as just being this thing that will make you gain weight is just not true. It's just absolutely not true. And when you look at like eating the rainbow, it's biodiversity. People think about like protein, and I think that's why people have such a hard time when they first go plant-based, because when you're eating meat, of course, and I'm a French trained chef, so like it's not like I'm a lifelong vegan. Like it was a transition, and so when you go from eating this very calorie dense portion of animal protein, you're looking for something to replace that with. So you have like your little sides or whatever, and then you have this animal protein piece. So when that gets removed from your plate, you're like, oh my God, what am I going to replace that with? And instead of thinking of like, what am I going to replace the protein with? I really challenge people to think of like, well, how many colors are on your plate? Are you eating the rainbow? How much plant diversity is there? Is everything on your plate beige? Like I think we have this like issue of like these beige plates, and that contributes to flavor as well. The more colors you have on your plate, the more flavorful it will be, the better you'll feel, the more fiber you're getting, the more different kinds of nutrients. It's literally like an all-encompassing supplement that you're getting through your diet. And I will say that too, with supplements, I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm deficient in vitamin A and vitamin D and, vitamin B. And so I'll take a supplement for that. But the first thing that you should do is think, well, how can I get this in a food source before I take a supplement? Because the reality is we absorb like less than 10% of the nutrients in supplements anyway. So in my opinion, unless you're very deficient, I think they're a waste of money if you don't try to get it from a food source first. And so instead of thinking like, where am I getting my protein from? And this is the first thing I say anyone when they work with me one-on-one, is to try to shift your thinking into thinking, where am I getting my fiber from? And how many colors am I eating today? Like, can I get every single color of the rainbow? And with that, like, how many greens am I getting today? Because if you think about greens, they are these little powerhouses of health, and there's so many different ways to get them, right? You can have them in smoothies, you can saute them, you can make a pesto. And like lately I pack my pestos with tons of spinach, like equal amounts of spinach and basil, because you're not even going to taste it and you're getting all those extra greens. And there's all these different studies that show about greens and all of the iron and protein. Like there's more protein per gram in broccoli than there is in beef, which is crazy. And I learned that fact and I was like, what? Like no one ever told me that. So yeah, I could go on forever, but it's just like getting all the colors in and getting all those greens. And I guess the last thing is like the amount of studies that there are done about greens and reversing heart disease and diabetes and things like that and weight loss is like, get your greens in every meal. Just try the best thing you can. I guess if you get anything from this is like, just eat more leafy greens. Because no matter what you have, it can help you.
My son's into dinosaurs, and he told his friend that I'm a leaf eater.
Yes.
Like that's how he explained it, but this is where it's such a joy to have you speaking, because your nutritional knowledge, where like somebody's asking about B vitamins. So what are like the go-to B vitamin veggies, and then we can maybe find some recipes in here that feature.
Yeah. So I will say on supplements too, because B vitamins is a really important one, especially, and actually the only vitamins that I take is a B complex, because it is a little bit harder to get, especially B12. And I will say this too. So B12 and it's originated in the soil. So what's happening right now is people of all eaters, like whether you're eating meat or plant-based, are becoming deficient in B12 because our soil is so contaminated. So it's contaminated from animal agriculture or glyphosate or, all these things that are happening. And so we're becoming deficient in B12. So the reason why we get B12 from animals is because they're in the soil. So they're absorbing it through eating grass and all these things. And so yeah, it's just really hard to get B12. So I will say on the B vitamins, and I'm glad that you asked, I take a B complex. I think it's better on your digestive system to take it as a complex altogether, and to take it in like a spray form. So I like the spray ones, because if you take it in a capsule, you don't absorb as much of it. So I like the Whole Foods brand personally for the B vitamins. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad. I was thinking like, oh, do we just eat dirty carrots?
I mean, yeah, I do that too.
It seems like so many plant-based switches are kind of, all habits really are soft influence. I know I went plant-based because my friend Mallory Morris, who may or may not be watching right now, and it had started a chain reaction of influence just because she was eating plants. And in your acknowledgements, you reference Paulina, who is I guess a culinary school friend who encouraged you to go vegan.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could talk about her and the initial, like, where did this idea even come from, even before you realized all of the benefits of it?
Yeah, my friend Paulina, she went vegan. I thought she was a total nutcase. So we went to culinary school together, and I'm actually going to see her in a couple days. I'm so excited. We went to culinary school together, and her parents are immigrants from Mexico, and they moved out here, and they like started a restaurant with literally no money. And now they're so successful. Their Mexican restaurant is literally the best Mexican food I've ever had. Truly, it's mind blowing. And,
What's the restaurant called, since we're talking about it?
oh yeah, there's a couple of them. The first one's called Viva Soul or Vive Soul. And then there's a couple. And so my friend Paulina's restaurant now is called Son of Wolf, and that's in Mountain View. And then her sister's restaurant is called Quinto Sol. So they have like a little chain of restaurants, and they're all so delicious. Like their homemade tortillas are like, and their empanadas, and like they have their grandmother's guajillo sauce, which is like the most, and they're not vegan restaurants, but there's just like these generational sauces that just like blow your mind. You're just like, how is this possible? This is so good. They still won't share the recipe with me. It's fine, I get it. But Paulina, she is someone that has struggled with her weight for forever, and she's always been like the curvier one in her family. And, growing up in Mexican culture, it's, Mexican food has a lot of lard in it. Mexico is the second most obese country, second to the United States. And, a lot of that has to do with availability and fast food. There's lots of like soda and candy and all that stuff in Mexico as well. But Paulina just had like a really hard time. She just like couldn't, and I gained 30 pounds when I went to French culinary school, because it is no joke. It's a lot of fat. It's a lot of sugar. And she ended up going to this like center. It was like this Ayurvedic kind of like retreat center where she lost 45 pounds in like 3 weeks. It was like the craziest. I saw her again and I was like, what is going on? And she's been vegan ever since. And she was someone that was really like, initially talking to me about it. And she's so soft where, she still cooks meat at her restaurants and stuff. And she's more or less like, I just want to show people. I don't want to like, bully people into a certain lifestyle or anything. I just want to show people what's possible. And I think you did something very similar where, you're just showing people what's possible, just simply like just by existing, So she's just, yeah, she's someone that I don't talk to a lot, but she, culinary school is very, very hard. And she helped me get through it. So I had to throw a little acknowledgement to her. Because yeah, there was a point where I thought vegans were totally crazy. So, it's been a journey.
So I'm skipping my next question, but I want to go a little bit into it's my book stand there, into the book a little bit. There's so many things in here that I love. Like one of the things I love, because you have tips about how to make it so easy, is these pancakes that you have, page 116. That's
Yes.
But what I love is in your introduction, you talk about, you're like, oh, make them, keep them in a pitcher in your fridge. And then you could, like, I could do pancakes all week long.
Yes.
For 2 seconds. Can you talk about, in here you have oats, you have bananas. There's not actually flour, but you do use some flours in other recipes. And I was wondering if you could talk about like gluten and the different kinds of flours, because I don't understand it.
Yeah, there's a lot of gluten like misinformation out there. And someone that suffers with an inflammatory disease, like it's very confusing. I've been afraid of gluten forever. I still am, truly, because there's valid reasons. So let me break it down a little bit. So wheat has turned into something unrecognizable than what it once was. So they have created this crazy super crop of wheat that is very genetically modified. It is very heavily sprayed. And then through that, it's also very heavily processed and in some cases bleached. So you're dealing with, so what gluten actually is just a binding protein. That's all it is. That's why it makes bread so deliciously. That's why you get crispy crusts and fluffy insides, and you get those perfect little holes in bread, and why pasta stretches, because it's a binding protein. That's all it is. So gluten itself is not to be feared, because all it's doing is it's just binding, and it's protein. So it's stretching. The problem is though, when you have this protein is such a binder, when you refine it and when you add all of these chemicals to it, you're actually creating like a nightmare for your gut, whether you're gluten intolerant or not. And I mean, having celiac disease is a totally different thing. You should completely avoid all sources of gluten, including barley and farro. But if you don't have celiac disease, you really want to look at like the sources of the wheat that you're getting. So if you have a reaction to getting a pizza, that's probably pretty normal. If you have a reaction to eating a bagel, if it makes you feel bloated, I'm going to tell you that like probably 9.5 out of 10 people feel pretty shitty after eating like I just cussed, after eating a typical bagel, because we're eating this processed wheat, or if you're eating a birthday cake or whatever it is. So what I like to say is you want to go for as close to the whole grain as possible. So for me, I found the grain spelt, which I like smile thinking about. I am so obsessed with spelt. It is one of those grains. It's a strain of wheat technically, but it's like its own thing. So it's one of those strains of wheat that is entirely its own. It hasn't been affected by GMOs yet. Like hopefully they stay away from spelt. And it's full of nutrients. So it's full of iron and vitamins and like amazing fiber and protein. And it's this grain that like when you eat a piece of spelt bread, like you feel nourished, right? You don't feel bloated. You don't feel guilty. You feel incredibly nourished by this grain because there's so much inside of it. So when you're eating refined wheat, like there's nothing in there. Like, so all you really have is that binding protein gluten, which can like wreak havoc on your digestive system. So I use spelt throughout this book. I also have a lot of gluten-free recipes if you just want to stick to the gluten-free, which is fine. But for me, it's like, don't be afraid of gluten just because everyone's telling you to. It's important to really understand, where it comes from, why there's issues with it, and to really look for more whole grain sources. So like, for instance, grains like barley and farro have gluten in them, but if you're getting organic whole barley or organic whole farro, like they're so good for you. They're so high in all these nutrients as well, and they're not really to be feared. So, and like my mom, for instance, she has really bad arthritis in her hands, and when she eats just like regular wheat products, her hands, like she can't even move her hands. But when I make her spelt products, she doesn't feel it at all. So we really want to think about like the glyphosate, the pesticides, the GMO, like all of those things are very much as valid as, the symptoms that you're feeling when you consume those products.
I don't know if this woman is on here, but people on the street have told me about a woman who lives in Southern Pines who went plant-based and completely healed her arthritis. And as these conversations happen, and maybe this, before we get more into the cookbook, might be a nice time for you to talk a little bit about your health journey, if
Totally.
you would like.
I love to. I think it's so important to get that, like, I'm relatable, I guess I would say, is like, I'm not just this like healthy guru or whatever. Like, I'm just a normal human trying to make sense of all the things. And so I have endometriosis, and I was diagnosed, I've basically had it since I was 11 years old. So it was a very rough intro to womanhood. And endometriosis affects the like endometrial lining around your uterus, but it can also cause cysts in all other places of your body. And it's like very painful. And so I basically was put on hormone replacements from the time I was 11 to 25, which was like so intense. Like I didn't realize how really intense that was until I was trying to get off the hormones. And I was just like, oh my God, this is insane. Why would everyone ever do this to someone? But it's just like, I basically saw, and being a chef is very intense as well. So it's like, I went through high school, which was really hard for me. I felt like very misunderstood in high school. I was bullied in high school. Like I had all these like weird things going on, but I was also someone that was dealing with a chronic health issue. And I didn't really know it at the time. I wasn't really supported by my doctors. I was just hush, hush, like, oh, you just have a painful period, get used to it. Like, this is what being a woman's all about, like, blah, 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 the whole thing. And, moving into my early 20s, like I had such debilitating pain that I actually stopped cooking, and I swore I would never be a chef again, because it was just too hard on my body. because this was way before nutrition school. It was so intense for me. I was like throwing up from pain. I was going to the hospital all the time. No one could help me. I was on opiates. I was like, it was insane. I was like, this is crazy for a woman in her early 20s to be so debilitated by something that no one can explain. Like no one, back then, no one really knew what to do. Like doctors, oh, you have endo, but like, here's hormones and pills and here's this, like, go away, you'll be fine, whatever, or surgeries, or, the options were very limited. And so my kind of breaking point was I experienced an insane amount of back pain, like to the point where my left leg would shake when I would lay down. Like it was crazy. And so I went to a spine specialist thinking there's something wrong with my spine as well. And he suggested fusing 3 of my vertebrae together, and there would be a chance that I would never walk again, but at least then maybe I would be out of pain. And this little conversation that I had with this doctor, I was like, I stood up and walked out. I was like, this is not happening. This is crazy. This is not even an option for me. And so I went back to school for nutrition. I learned about food, and I learned how to advocate for myself as a patient and as someone who desperately was seeking answers, and doctors that like knew what they were talking about. And so what ended up happening is I ended up having a cyst that was like leaning against my spine, causing all this nerve damage. And after my last surgery, right before I went plant-based, I had such a rough recovery that my husband was like, okay, we're doing this. We're going plant-based. Like it's the last thing that we haven't tried. And for me, I was so addicted to cheese that I was like, no, I can't do it. Like there's no way, like don't take away the cheese, And my husband was like, I can't watch you suffer anymore. This has gotten out of control. So we went plant-based for 30 days, and my recovery like sped up the second that I quit eating dairy. And within 6 months, I was able to get off of all of my prescription pills. I was able to wean off of my hormone replacements, off of birth control. And it's been almost 4 years, and I'll never go back. Like it saved my life, because I think what people also don't talk about when you deal with a chronic illness is how much trauma you go through, and how much it affects your mental state, and how much it affects your spirit and who you are. Like, it saved my life in the sense that it like saved me. It saved Bailey. It saved this person in here from no return. It just got so exhausting. And I think that's why I wrote the book, because I really feel for people who are suffering with chronic illness, because it is very isolating. It's very taxing on your mental health. I think, if you look at the rates of people with chronic illness and suicide and depression, like they're all very connected, because it's hard to feel heard. It's hard to feel, it's hard to feel seen. So yeah, going plant-based really helped. And then with that, I've been able to surround myself, even just online, by the people I follow, like doctors and specialists and healers and people who are talking about energy. And like, you can start to surround yourself with people who know what they're talking about and who are looking for answers just like you are. And you can start to really feel like hope. And although endometriosis isn't something that can be cured, you can heal. Like you can heal your symptoms, you can heal your body, you can heal your inflammation, and you can heal like your spirit. And you can heal the trauma that you go through seeing a million doctors about your uterus. Like that for a young woman is traumatizing, so yeah, that's like the short little version of my health journey.
Well, I'm curious, what are some of the biggest barriers that you encounter with your clients? You're like, I can't give up cheese. We were talking at the beginning of our conversation, why is there this, that's why I call it going vegetable-y, because there's like a word association recoil with vegan. But what are some of the barriers that you encounter with your clients as you're hand-holding people to the 30-day plant-based challenge or whatever?
Yeah. I think culture and tradition is like the biggest one, so like, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. It's a great example. And like, people just can't imagine not having turkey. But the reality is like, what makes Thanksgiving so amazing is all the sides anyway, you know what I mean? Like by the time people get to the turkey, usually it's dry, or, there's like it's fine, but it's not the point. And so I guess my point is it's culture, it's tradition, and it's also food addiction. Like cheese is incredibly addicting. It releases dopamine in your brain. So you actually get high when you eat cheese, so it's like, it's addicting. Sugar is food addicting. Like, bacon is addicting, but when you look at it, and when I talk to my clients and I'm like, hey, like, if you're eating bacon every day, you might as well be smoking cigarettes, because you're eating a level 1 carcinogen that is proven and known to cause cancer, and you're still doing it. So like, if you might as well just like go off the rails and just do whatever. And when I talk like that, they're kind of like, oh, like, I guess you're right. I never really thought of it. Because if you look at like, the World Health Organization or the FDA, like they have categorized these things as level 1 carcinogens. The same amount of toxicity is in bacon as it is in smoking cigarettes. It's the same. I mean, it's different. Of course, it affects your body differently. They're different chemicals, but it's still a level 1 carcinogen. So it's really just like showing people how to create new habits and new rituals. And also, it's very important to respect your culture as well. And I totally understand that. Like, I understand the importance of respecting culture, respecting tradition. And I think that you can respect your culture and tradition even more when you're also respecting your body, you're respecting the environment, the world around you, because that's a very real thing, the effect of animal agriculture and the environment. And there are ways to do that. And that's why I wrote this, because there's so many ways that you can, respect your culture. Like, for instance, I will just, let me see, there's this one recipe. So these al pastor tacos are literally so delicious. They're made with oyster mushrooms, but al pastor is traditionally pork, right? And it's a very like traditional Mexican food. And I was like, how can I like really respect this dish that's so delicious? And it literally, so many people have made this recipe so far, and they're like, this is so amazing. Like, go figure, we can have al pastor and it can be plant-based.
Can you your caramel sauce?
Huh?
Your caramel sauce?
Oh, on the caramel apple oats?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. It's literally almond butter based, which is like so random. So it's high in protein, high in really healthy fats, and it's completely refined sugar free. So that's the other thing about the book, is that it's completely refined sugar free. There's no refined sugar in the whole book. I love how there's a guy leaf blowing right outside my window right now.
Really okay. Well, you end your book with organization and meal plans, and I know that that's a lot of what you do through your business. And I will say, when I was having a conversation the other day with this woman, I had been helping her sons find books, and she had wandered to the cookbook section, and she was flipping through your books, other vegan books, and she was like, I just don't know, like I can't get my husband on board, the kids. And one of the things I said to her, and this is what I actually do in my house, is I cook like one big piece of meat that they can like gnaw on all week, and then everything else is vegan, and then they can just add stuff to it. And if you do it, you say in the book, you're like, put your oxygen mask on first so you can be your best self for your family and children. I think it's the intro to the meal plans. But I was wondering if you could talk to the meal plans, you talk about the 30 days challenge on your website. Like, okay, do it imperfectly. Just go.
Yeah. And I think, the more you talk about how you're cooking a vegan meal to your family, the more they're going to question you, right? Like, if you're the one cooking, and this is what I tell people all the time, if they're eating food from your like hard work, then like just make what you want to make and they'll deal with it. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I talk to about so much with my clients, because it's like a lot of pressure to cook meat, when it's like, if you're making a really delicious recipe, they're really not going to say anything unless you're making a big deal about it being vegan. And if you really want to like talk to someone and your partner is not that person that's going to support you, then find a friend who is and get it out with them so that you can just move forward and feed your family the same way that you're feeding you. And I guess I'm more old school in that way, because that's how I was raised. Like, I have clients now that make a different meal for every single child's, every night. And I'm just like, I don't understand how you do this. This is so exhausting. Like, when I was growing up, like, this was dinner and that was it, like there was no,
yeah,
like that was it. There was no question. So Yeah, I feel like some of that, I feel like we should bring back. There's a lot of old traditions that I don't agree with, but I think that in itself, just like for mental health alone, is just like such a great thing. But with the meal plan, so the way that I think about meal planning is very different. So instead of, I think meal prep kind of got into this thing of like, okay, so you'll have like brown rice and chicken and a steamed broccoli, and it's very boring, and you're eating the same thing every single day. And for me, I like to think of meal prepping and meal planning as sending little like love notes to your future self. So you're making like an Alfredo sauce and you're just popping it in there because you know you're going to want to make Alfredo in 2 days, or you're prepping some granola bars. Like, let's see, in this one, the first one, I have like a cold pressed juice, a mason jar salad, Alfredo sauce, and a hummus. Like, it's not a ton. It probably take you an hour, hour and a half to make everything. But prepping these little things can save you so much time in your week. And when you really start to like plan ahead, right? Because I think that's also a problem. We have food waste. So we think, okay, I'm going to buy all the vegetables in the grocery store and I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet, but I'm so excited. I'm going vegan and like I'm doing this. But then you have like all these rotting vegetables in your fridge that you don't know what to do with. And so it's really important to be like, okay, what does my week look like? Like, how busy am I this week? Realistically, how much time can I commit to cooking? What do I feel like? What are my kids' activities like? Like how much energy am I going to have to like fuel them with? Like, all these factors are so important into making your meal plan. And just the same way we plan our meetings and our schedules and our kids' soccer practices, it's just as important to plan out our food. Like, we're going to the store. Why are we going to the store? What are we getting? What do we want to eat this week? And how can I best support myself? And how can my family also help me and supporting them? And so that's the way that I really look at meal prepping and meal planning, is just sending little love notes to yourself in the form of like a sauce here and there, or you make a granola bar or a mason jar salad or something like that. So, or the oatmeal cookie skillet or cookies. So you just like have something, and you have a plan. And yeah, and it's all about putting your own oxygen mask on first. And just, I mean, if you're making delicious, healthy food for your family, they will notice, you know what I mean? They will be so excited. And I think it's more about leading by example than trying to convince people of something they're not quite ready for.
I'm not a planner or prepper, but you said something in your book that I do have one like Pharaoh in your fridge that's always there ready. And I think that's what you're talking about. Then you can
make things. So if you have quinoa already made in your fridge, then it's really easy to like throw quinoa, or like I like to make crispy tofu in my air fryer. Because then you just have quinoa and crispy tofu, and you know, then you throw like an avocado on there and like a dressing or something. So yeah, you just like have these little love notes to yourself that you're like so hungry and you're like, oh my God, thank God I have this quinoa in here because I am so hungry right now. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Well, and the creativity factor is part of what I love. And we opened up talking about flavor, and Mallory, who's listening, and she has a great vegan Instagram as well. But she had a question. What are the top 5 spices that you're constantly running out of?
Yes. Okay, cumin and coriander are like a match made in heaven, especially when you're cooking Mexican food. Like, you have to have cumin and coriander.
Are you doing cumin seeds or like ground cumin?
I do ground cumin. If you do cumin and coriander seeds, I have like a little spice bill that you can grind them up. They have much more flavor. So if you have a little bit of time, you just grind them up like that. But if you're
doing the seeds, like
you can do that too. It depends on, and honestly, in Indian food, I like to do whole coriander seeds as well. I think that's really great. But I also really love, my husband's addicted to smoked paprika. Like, he literally puts it on everything. It's so hilarious. And what else? Cumin, coriander, paprika, cinnamon is a huge spice in our house. So we put cinnamon on everything. It's actually like really good for your blood. It's really good for your heart, your blood pressure. And it's warming too. So I really love to put cinnamon like on fresh fruit and my matcha. If I drink coffee, I'll put cinnamon in there, especially if I'm drinking something with caffeine. It will really help with like anxiety, or like if you get the coffee jitters, like adding a little bit of cinnamon can really help kind of like regulate that. So I really love that.
Such a good like when you're taking out sugar,
Yeah.
you throw cinnamon on something, all of a sudden it is like delicious and
So
delightful.
delicious. Yeah, it's so good.
And I have a question
Yeah.
with that, and I'm interrupting your question, but one of the tricks I did in conjunction with cinnamon is I got a vanilla bean and made like some homemade vanilla extract, and that was my other like secret sugar.
Yeah, vanilla is great.
Throwing that in. Keep going, sorry.
I mean, I think with spices, like you just can't go wrong. It's so important because sometimes I feel like people think like, oh, if I buy this spice, I'm never going to use it again. But you should just experiment. And you can also, like, if you have a spice you haven't used in a while, you could Google like plant-based recipes using this spice, and you'll find something, because it will help you be really creative with that spice and understand like kind of where it comes from. I love using turmeric. I think turmeric is amazing. Always with a little bit of black pepper. And then the other thing I would also say is to experiment with the kind of salt you're using. So salt has like such a different flavor quality than you realize. So if you're using the same kind of salt and everything, it's really empowering when you change the kind of salt. So me lately, my new salt obsession is flaky sea salt. So I love putting big flaky sea salts as a finishing salt on top of things. Like for instance, on top of the oatmeal cookie skillet, we use flaky sea salt, and it's so good. It's like insane how much this little tiny bit of flaky sea salt completely changes the flavor. And also like black salt is a really amazing salt to use because it has a sulfur flavor. So I just added this brand new vegan quiche to my website, and we use black salt in it, and it tastes like egg. It's literally the craziest thing ever. But yeah, these spices can really help you kind of manipulate these foods into being really good, but they're also so health promoting too. Like they're so good for you. Like they're so amazing for you. And yeah, I think you can just get really creative, and also using just dried herbs and just experimenting. Like I have this huge thing of dried herbs that my mom makes from her garden every year. So my mom has this insane garden in Colorado, and she just gives me a big blend of whatever she grew that year. So sometimes it's like tarragon and chive, and like sometimes there's oregano in it, or mint she'll even throw in there, and it's this random spice blend, and I put it in everything, and it's literally so good, and it's health promoting. It's got so much love in it because it's from my mom, but there's no rhyme or reason to it. I just throw it in there and it's great.
And there's a book we sell at the store called The Flavor Bible, which is so good about flavor affinities. So if you're just unsure about how to make vegetables the amazing things they are, and this much more than I do, like some common flavor affinities that will give a potato something amazing, and it will hit those areas. And you do this in your cookbook, hitting Italian and Asian and lots of different.
Well, and I talk about too, like the 5 like layers of flavor, right? So we have salty, there's sour, there's fat. Like fat is a flavor. If your dish is very like acidic or it's very salty, it probably just means a little bit of fat in there, right? Or there's spicy, or there's sweet. So if you look at all these levels of flavor and you think to yourself like, oh my God, like I just made this sauce. It's so good, but it's kind of flat, and it has all the spices, it has the salt, but it's just a flat sauce, and I can't figure out what to do to brighten it up. And usually what you can do to brighten it up is just like add a little bit of lemon juice, or you add lime, or you add a little bit of orange, or a little bit of white wine vinegar. And I talk about this in the book, and I name each like layer of flavor out. And this can really help you cook intuitively. And I talk about intuitive cooking in the book because I never want someone to go through my book and just cook everything exactly the way I say to forever. I think the way I say to cook things is great to learn, and it's a great place to start, but it's also so important to go off from that, to be like, okay, I like it this way. What happens if I add more garlic? Or what happens if I add lime juice instead of lemon juice? Like, I think there's so much room for, there's just wiggle room for your personality, for your own likes, for the season, right? Like if something's not in season, you use something that is in season. And that can really help you cook intuitively, which in turn will give you more confidence. in the kitchen, and will give you more confidence as your own health advocate as well. So yeah, the 5 levels of flavor is like the really good place to start.
Well, I loved that too, because it speaks to just do it imperfectly, like just start. And then if you make a mistake, we were just talking how timely this conversation is for me, because I've been almost entirely plant-based for a long time now, and I've had the worst 5 days in a row the last 5 days. And but you don't like go off and then keep going off. You go off and then go back. Like you just, it's a baseline of plants, you just do it, you just start, and
you just take it one meal at a time. You know what I mean? Like, because I think we all get so hard on ourselves. I think especially women, we get so hard on ourselves. And I think, instead of thinking like, I'm going vegan forever, you just start. For me, I started with 30 days, and you start with just one meal. You just say, okay, like, it's middle of the day. What are we going to have for dinner? Let's try plant-based, or let's try a new plant-based restaurant that just came into town. You don't have to think of it as a whole life thing, which I do now, but like that took time, and it takes time and education and confidence. And it's a lot of factors that go into it. And really it's all about like one meal at a time. And you just start fresh every single meal, not even every day, just every single meal you start fresh, and it's like a new opportunity.
And we are so lucky in our town, in addition to this great cookbook resource, we have the new plant-based right behind the bookshop in the yoga studio. I guess it's called Roots. We have 195. We have Nature's Own, this incredible health food store, which is also a great resource. And, we are, for our small town, it's an easy thing to do, even eating out. Like it's an easy thing to do deliciously. We have our farmers markets. We have the farm to table. We have a farmers market almost every day, except for like Tuesdays.
Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, for a small rural place where, we are set up to thrive in
and yeah, exactly. And like at your farmers markets, like if you actually make relationships with your farmers and the people selling your produce, they'll give you cheaper produce. They'll tell you how to cook it. They'll give you new ideas. You'll like look at the zucchini and you'll be like, I know who grew this, So it just has a whole different like energy to it when you can really get that connected to what you're eating.
Well, and we only have a couple more minutes. If anyone else has any more questions.
I saw there's one question in the Q&A section. Or she asked a couple. So the first one.
Thank you, Suze. And Chef Bai, I'm like mortified. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I had it up here, so I was just waiting. So do I have a garden? I live in an apartment. And I live in San Diego. So it gets so hot. So to have like raised beds on my deck is a struggle to keep the roots like moisturized, honestly. So I have a pepper garden right now, which has been going like decently well. There's a few like cats and other animals that have also been enjoying my peppers. So I'm attempting to have a garden. I don't. And it's hard to also live up to my mother because she has the most insane garden I've ever seen. So I'm like, okay, Mom, this is all you. Do I use canned veggies? Not really. Like I would say that if you don't have availability for certain vegetables, I would use frozen over canned. Frozen has much less sodium. It has much more nutrients in there. However, I do use canned beans all the time. If I'm in a pinch, I will definitely use canned beans for sure, because soaking beans and cooking them, it can take forever. Do I use a dehydrator? I don't. I want a dehydrator so badly. I swear I have every other kitchen appliance. But again, I live in an apartment and I have maxed my space. Like I have no room because dehydrators are pretty big, but I love dehydrators. I have a chef that I'm good friends with and he makes so many amazing things in a dehydrator. So yeah, there's so many cool things you can do with the dehydrator. And then the last question is, do I have an Instant Pot or do I ever use an Instant Pot? I actually don't ever use an Instant Pot or a pressure cooker. There's no reason exactly why I don't. I think they're amazing for cooking quick meals, for cooking quick rice. You can actually make beans from start to finish so quickly in an Instant Pot as well. I think they're an amazing resource. I'm just so old school that like I like to kind of cook everything just like on the stove, on the fire. And again, I just don't have room for the dehydrator. But I do love a good slow cooker, a good crock pot. That's kind of that's my go-to. I love a slow cooker. So yeah, I hope that was all of them.
That was all. And if you are interested in Instapot, Jamie Dement, who also has a great farm nearby, has a cookbook that we sell at the store that is Instapot magic with vegetables. But Chef Bai, I want to thank you. I want to thank all of y'all who are watching now or in the future for joining. You can check out all of Chef Bai's internet world as well. Come to the bookshop and get Cook, Heal, Go Vegan. And I'm always game to chat with any of y'all about vegetables. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And if anyone has any questions, you can reach out to me. And I do teach cooking classes like I talked about in my online membership. So yeah, like I'm here for you guys. It's a journey. So yeah, just don't ever hesitate to reach out. Bye. Thanks.
Thanks.